Alpine are in the same position as Renault were through 2020. They're almost there. The car that we've seen this year, the 521, it certainly is a development from the RS20. Very different. I mean, we spoke a bit about it at launch, and I think now seeing it on track, it's quite evident how far they've gone with this centerline cooling concept, which wasn't necessarily apparent from the renders released when the car was launched, because obviously the angle and obviously things do get played about, but definitely as we can see that middle of the car is much broader, and the team have been very clear as to what they're doing. I mean, it's quite obvious they're really turning the roll hoop and the top body into a third side pod, and they are doing this by taking cooling out of the side pods, move them above the engine. That means the side pods, as you can see on the Alpine, are particularly narrow, lots of bare floor, and that's really proving potentially to be very important this year with the change in the floor regulations. So this is what they're aiming for. They've gone much further than we expected. We also saw them run two types of engine cover through the test, both very wide, but when you look at it in side profile, one of them had the bulge running throughout most of the shark fin at the back, and then another one after the first day reduced. So it looks like they've got both a hot and a cold weather cooling package with this centerline cooling concept that they've got. But otherwise, we don't know much about what's going on under the bodywork. Renault were one of the teams that were expected to go for split turbo either this year, certainly for next year. So, lots of things we'd love to see underneath the skin, but certainly on track. I mean, the car looks good, and it's going to be, sort of bang in there at the front of the midfield. Alpha, or we have to use the full word, haven't we? Alfa Romeo, because there's two Alphas in Formula One, which still confuses us. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's kind of good and bad news. The car is better. It's got some lovely features, as we said, when it was launched, particularly this kind of cape nose, lots of details on there. But, designs don't win championships. It's, it's the performance. And as much as the Ferrari engine has improved, and Frederick Vasseur was quite clear in saying that the engine is better this year, they're still going to be towards the back of the grid, I think, unfortunately. I don't think we've seen enough there. But as we saw through 2020, when the tyres and the setup and the drivers are right, the car can blitz the others. So I think it's going to be a bit of an up and down season. Perhaps it's very similar to Williams. I think it might be interesting to see who actually comes out at the bottom of the pile at the end of this year. I mean, obviously it's unfortunate, but sadly, in any championship, someone has to come last. And, I think Alfa Romeo haven't necessarily done quite enough to really get them out of that, in football terms, relegation zone. But again, it'll be interesting to see what goes on through the year. And you do wonder, knowing the aero team at Hinwil, whether they do have something else up their sleeve through the year to bring aero developments onto that car to add performance and maybe do something that nobody else has done. Equally, Haas are in a very similar position. Their car is barely a changed 2020 car. They've altered the nose in terms of the bodywork, but not the crash structure, and put a cape underneath it for the first time. They've played with the barge boards and the diffuser and the floor edge more really just to accommodate the legality rather than any big new ideas. And they've already said that they're not going to develop the car through the year. They're going to go straight into looking at 2020, and it's just going to be the work of the race engineers and setup that's going to add any time to that car through the year, which is a really unusual way of approaching a season, particularly being very open and honest about this. That why wouldn't you try and keep your aero program up for 2021? Not simply because it will add performance to the car and it'll give them a much better chance of not finishing at the absolute bottom, which would be embarrassing for them. But also, if you keep your aero program going on the current car, that means that your wind tunnel results and all these new parts that you create will then go to the racetrack, and you can actually make sure that they work. And this means that you're sure throughout the year that your correlation of on track and wind tunnel and CFD is working. So if you have a whole season of not being able to correlate what's happening in the wind tunnel to on track, you could be making assumptions with your new car design for 2022 that are completely wrong because the correlation somehow has kind of wavered, which means that they could have spent all this year looking at 2022, and when the car hits the track, it just doesn't work as they expect. So it's a very odd situation, and you just have to hope that they're clever enough to be able to kind of keep a track on exactly what's going with the current car and with the development of the new car, for fear of going down a blind alley there. So I am concerned about Haas, and we'll again just have to see how that year pans out for them.
Yeah, I suppose against that they're looking this year also as a year with two rookie drivers, so not too much should be expected from them either. Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, of course, and both of them look pretty good at various stages. But Mazepin, particularly when the track was really dirty on the first day, got out there and was throwing the car around with very little grip and looking as if he was kind of into it straight away. Just to reiterate the Williams performance. 30.1 on the Sunday afternoon when everybody was kind of putting on soft tyres, the C5, that was the softest of the tyres, 30.1. And Lewis Hamilton on the same tyre, 30.0. Daniel Ricciardo, 30.1 on the C4. So that would suggest that was that's about what the C4 to the C5 is a McLaren versus a Williams. But that's an impressive time from George. Bear in mind, of course, that Williams just ran three drivers, Nissany and then Latifi and then George over the 3 days. Yeah. So they each got a day. Yeah. No other team did that. So George just had that one day, got in, did a lot of laps, and was right up there with Lewis Hamilton. So, not bad. Did actually 158 laps. In 1 day. Just on that total, Pierre Gasly put together the most number of laps, 237. Kimi Raikkonen, 229. So there's the Alfa Romeo and the Alfa Tauri, and there's why they put in so many laps. But the Alfa Tauri actually looked pretty good, I thought, whenever either driver was in it. It looked like quite a quick car. You could almost argue a quicker car relative to its near opposition than it was last year.
Absolutely. I mean, we know they had a great car last year, particularly in race trim. It was very balanced, very easy to drive. Over the winter, the key change really for Alpha Tauri is that they're now using Red Bull's 60% wind tunnel. And clearly that works for Red Bull. And they're working on the same thing. So now their aero should be even better. And equally, they're taking lots of listed parts from Red Bull, with the suspension in particular. So things are starting to kind of bubble up quite nicely for Alpha Tauri. And again, when you see the performance, you have to keep reminding yourself they won a race last year. And throughout the season, you saw Gasly putting in some fantastic race performances, as was Kvyat. So this is looking good. How high up they would consistently be, I think is open to some question, but certainly looking very, very competitive. And Tsunoda, with those qualifying runs, albeit aided with a little bit of DRS trickery by not following the classical circuit DRS points, but still, he needs to understand qualifying, and that will be the key thing that he needs to get before he reaches the first race weekend at Bahrain. But everything's looking good there, isn't it?
Yeah, and Yuki saying afterwards, I'm starting to understand how fast I could go on quick corners in a Formula One car. Classic young driver from that region of the world. They just love fast corners. And my only worry about Yuki is he's so good. I just hope that in this passion for fast corners, he doesn't actually forget that 80% of the world's corners, sadly, are very slow and very boring, and they're the ones you really have to be quick on. But I mean, that's just a normal thing. Scubs, I know you got to go, but some quick words on Aston Martin, what you saw in the flesh there. They did only 314 laps. Vettel didn't. He was running the test time most of the time, and then he lost a lot of time. I think it was on the Saturday. If we were calling them Racing Point or even Force India, and they're only doing 314 laps on a 3-day test when AlphaTauri are doing 422, we would have been quite shocked. But now we kind of think, it's a new team, new car. Of course it isn't, but a bit of a strange test for Aston Martin, really.
It was. I mean, I think that they are an odd conundrum. I think there's so much optimism for them. But as you say, we have to remember this is very much the same team. The investment and the money and the resources haven't really hit home yet in the way that hopefully they will over the next few years. At this time of year, we're looking at through the year, we look at several championships. For me, there's the design championship of who releases the best looking car with the best details on it. And then there's the testing championship, which we could say Red Bull have won this year. Then, of course, you've got the ones that really matter, which are the the drivers and the constructors at the end of the year.
The real one.
Yeah.